Hi everybody, and welcome to my lesson on where do chords and progressions come from. So, the goal of this lesson is to teach you basically where chord progressions come from, and then in the next couple lessons I'm going to show you how you can play them on your guitar or uke. But for this one, I mainly want you to just watch the visual of the keyboard. Now, you might not know what the keyboard, you might not know anything about piano or keyboards. That's fine. You don't need to know much. But the main thing is, if you look how the notes, the black notes are grouped here in groups of 2, and then groups of 3, and then groups of 2, and 3, 2, 3. So there is only this many notes, different notes in music. Like here's from C here to this C. That's all the different notes, because this C starts over again, and so it's the same thing repeated. So it's not that many notes. It's 12 different notes if you include the black ones. So it's really easy to visualize what I'm telling you by looking at the keyboard and just seeing how the notes are spaced and just how they look. I think it'll help. In university, when you're doing a music program, all students have to take a keyboard harmony class. And keyboard harmony is just what this is, what we're doing now. What it means is, the reason students do that is because you can't see it the same way on fretted instruments or, of course, flutes or trumpets or things like that. You can't see it the same way. But on a keyboard, it's really laid out well for what this lesson is all about chords. And it'll help you get a good understanding that when you're playing those on your guitars or uke, it'll just make more sense. So, what are chord progressions and why are we doing them? So let's start by just looking at this old gospel song, I'll Fly Away. You all know it. It's a pretty easy song. And you look at the music's written out there. Up here, this is like the staff, this treble clef where piano plays. It means play it with your right hand. And then this is in the key of G. We know that. And that's what this little sign, this sharp tic-tac-toe thing up here, that's what that tells us too. It's in the key of G. And it also tells us that all the F's are sharp. And I'll tell you why. Well, I can tell you why, but the main thing to understand here is what we're trying to learn are chord progressions. So what is a chord progression? Well, when you see this, it starts on G, and then it progresses to C, and then it progresses back to G, and then it progresses to D, and then to G. Chord progression from one chord to another. That's exactly what it means. Now, you've heard people talk about, okay, that's a 1 chord, and that's a 4 chord, and that's a 1 chord, and that's a 5 chord, and that's a 1 chord. And you've heard people talk about things like 2, 5, 1s or whatever. And what the heck does that mean? Well, that's what this is all about, this lesson. It's just really basic chord progression stuff. So when you're looking at, I'm going to show you some stuff on a music staff too, and you don't really have to understand a lot about note reading. It's mainly about looking at the visual. Just look at the visual and see what how the notes are spaced and things like that. You don't have to actually know the names of the notes in this case for this lesson. So this is a basic scale, right? Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. If you look at it on the piano, below here, it just goes up all the white notes and then back down. And you'll see on the graph here, the music staff, the way that this works is it's built on a system of line, space, line, space, line, space, line, space. So the first note is C, and then it has a little line going through it right here. And then the next note is D, so it goes up to the space. And line, space, and that's if the notes are going up a step at a time. So if you want to know more about scales and how they're built and all that kind of stuff, there's other lessons that I've already got online. The links are below, and you can go to those and really learn how scales are constructed and what makes them work. But for now, what we're trying to learn is what a chord progression is. And it starts with just a major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And when you play one note at a time, it's called melody. And when you play more than one note at a time, it's called harmony or a chord. So the basis of what chords are is if you take this note, C right here, and you go every second note, you're going to get a chord. So let me show you an example of that right here. So I've taken that C chord, I've taken every second note. See, and you can see it on the piano here. It's C. I've got the C and then skip. So it's every second note. That's what this chord is. It's a major chord, C major. And you've all played that chord before in different songs, lots of times. Okay? So what happens is when you go up the scale, C, D, E, F, G, and you just make a chord on each one of the notes, it sounds like this. Okay, so that's called a harmonized scale. And a harmonized scale is what gives us the basic structure for chord progressions. Because most songs now, if you're doing a song, most of the songs you do, if you're in the key of C, for instance, it's going to be chords that fit in here for the most part. They might be a little bit different. Some of them might be major or sevenths. We'll talk about all that later. But it's going to be a C, like for most songs, country songs or folk songs, C, F, and G. It's a 1, 4, 5. Excuse me. So the 1, 4, and 5. So C, F, and G. So a lot of the songs you've played are probably C, F, and G. I'm sure that you've played songs with C and then A minor in them sometimes. So there's all sorts of different songs. And if the song stays in the key of C, which most folk songs and country songs do for the most part, they stay in one key, they're going to use basically a choice of these chords. You know, so if you take, so the reason there's Roman numerals here is because when you're doing the steps of the scales, you use Roman numerals, because when you're looking at the numbers of the notes, I'm going to make this a bit closer to you. So if I was to, this would be the root, this is C of a chord, so it's called the root because it's home, right? And then the next note is E, and it's, if this is 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, if you just number these notes going up, like that's what these are. If this is 1, this is 3, right? So it's the 1, the 3, and the 5. That's what's in this chord. 1, 3, and 5. Now, if I want to write that here beside the notes, I could write a 1. I could use normal numbers here. 1, 3, and 5. But if I was doing the same thing down here with the actual space, the scale steps, it would get confusing because you'd have the same number system using for going both ways. But as it is, the Roman numerals act as the numbers when we're writing them out. If we're writing out a chord progression by numbers, we write them out using Roman numerals. And if you look, some of them are large Roman numerals and some are small. And that because if it's minor, you write small Roman numerals. And if it's major, you write large ones. So this is how the basic harmonized scale works. So it's just a chord built on each scale tone. And if you do that on the first position of the scale, or the 1, the first position, the 1 chord is always a major, C major. Or in this, it doesn't matter what key you're in, but we can talk about that later. But for now, C major. When you go to the 2 chord, it's going to be a minor, D minor. When you go to the 3 chord, it's going to be a minor. When you go to the 4 chord, it's going to be a major. 5 chord's going to be a major. 6 chord's going to be a minor. The 7th chord's going to be a minor, but also, if you look at these, they're not quite the same as another minor. Let's look at the difference here. Here's an A minor chord. If you look at it on the piano, it starts on the root here, and then it's got 1, 2, 3 there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what makes it sound like a minor chord. Right there. You can hear it there. Whoops. So, but when you go to this next chord, if we count the same thing, start at the root, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Like the other minor chord would have been 4, so you'd have a black note there. So this is called a half diminished. And diminished means, so we've got a minor, and then that means the 5th of the chord, or the top note, is flattened. That's why it's called, or diminished. So that's why the chord's called diminished. We'll talk more about those two. But for now, this is really all I wanted to cover in this lesson. And just to really give you a basic understanding of where they come from. You don't have to know all the details that I talked about today, but maybe watch this video a few times and see if it sinks in and it kind of makes sense to you the way that they're built. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to play these, what I just did. Instead of showing you on piano, I'm going to pull up a guitar fretboard and a ukulele fretboard so you can see how to play them on your instruments and actually find out how they sound when you play them. Okay, see you soon.